Two men sit in the same circle. One has taken money from Rome, the other wants to drive Rome out, by force if necessary. If they had met on a street corner, they might have fought. Jesus puts them on the same team. Welcome to Bible in Focus. This is The Misfit, 12, The Disciples Unfiltered. Why Jesus chooses flawed people to carry a holy message. Episode 6, Simon the Zealot, the revolutionary disciple. We don't know as many personal details about Simon as we do about Peter or Matthew, but the name attached to him is enough to make your eyebrows lift. Zealot. In that world, zeal wasn't a personality quirk. It was a stance, a fire. A willingness to resist Rome with your whole life, sometimes violently. Even if Simon wasn't officially part of the organized Zealot movement, the label tells you what kind of man he was known to be. Intense. Convicted, not neutral. Simon is the kind of man who sees oppression and can't unsee it. The kind of man who hears Caesar and feels his jaw tighten. The kind of man who doesn't just want change, he wants justice. Now here's the misfit tension. Jesus calls Simon, and then Jesus calls Matthew. A collaborator and a revolutionary. A man who profited under the system and a man who hated the system. And Jesus doesn't space them out on different teams. He makes them brothers. That alone is a miracle. Because what destroys most movements isn't the enemy outside. It's the anger inside. It's the inability to sit with someone you believe is the problem. So imagine the early days. They're walking the roads together, they're sharing meals, they're listening to Jesus teach. And Simon is waiting for the moment Jesus finally becomes the kind of Messiah he's been longing for. The one who throws Rome off their backs. The one who makes the powerful bleed. The one who turns the tables on the empire. But Jesus doesn't do that. Jesus heals a Roman centurion's servant. Jesus tells people to love their enemies. Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Jesus refuses to be used as a weapon, which means Simon's discipleship is not just following Jesus's feet. It's surrendering his definition of victory, and that's where Simon becomes one of the most important disciples for our time, because some of us don't just follow Jesus, we try to recruit Jesus. We try to pull him into our battles, our outrage, our side, our tribe. Simon's whole identity is fight. Jesus calls him into a kingdom where the real enemy is deeper than Rome. Sin, pride, hatred, the darkness in the human heart that makes every empire possible in the first place. So what happens to a revolutionary when he follows a Messiah who won't pick up a sword? At first, it probably feels like disappointment, confusion, maybe even frustration. Because when you've built your life around resistance, surrender sounds like weakness. But then Jesus shows Simon something else. Strength that doesn't need violence, authority that doesn't need intimidation, power that heals instead of humiliates. And slowly, the zeal gets purified, not removed, redeemed. Jesus doesn't snuff Simon's fire out, he changes what the fire is for. There's a moment in the Gospels where the disciples argue about greatness. Who's the biggest? Who's the closest? Who deserves the top seat? That argument doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens among men who each came with their own obsession. Peter wants to lead. James and John want honor. Matthew wants acceptance. Simon wants revolution, and Jesus keeps responding with the same pattern. Greatness is not dominating. Greatness is serving. The kingdom doesn't come by force. It comes by transformation. Then comes the night of arrest. This is the moment Simon might have been waiting for. Finally, conflict. Finally, showdown. And what happens? Jesus heals the man whose ear was cut off. Jesus stops the violence. Jesus accepts the cup. Jesus chooses the cross. For a zealot, that is either the end of faith or the beginning of understanding. Because if Jesus is willing to die rather than kill, then his kingdom is not built the way every other kingdom is built. And after the resurrection, everything changes. The disciples don't become political warriors. They become witnesses, not men who take over Jerusalem, men who testify in it, not men who conquer by the sword, men who conquer by truth, courage, love, and the Spirit of God. Simon the Zealot becomes part of a movement that outlasts Rome without ever becoming Rome. That's the quiet revolution. So what is Simon's misfit flaw? It's the belief that the problem is always out there. that if we just defeat the right enemy, we'll finally be whole. Simon's story says Jesus aims deeper than our enemies. He aims at our hearts. And here's the uncomfortable application. Some of you are angry, and you have good reasons. You've been hurt. You've watched injustice. You've felt the world tilt the wrong direction. But if your zeal is eating your joy, crushing your compassion, and turning people into enemies you can't love, then it's not holy zeal anymore. It's a fire that's consuming you. Jesus does not shame Simon for caring. He calls Simon to a higher kind of courage. Courage that doesn't need to hate. Courage that can sit at a table with a former enemy. Courage that can fight the darkness without becoming dark. And that may be one of the greatest miracles in the entire disciple group. Somewhere in that circle, Simon the Zealot and Matthew the tax collector became brothers. Not because they agreed on everything, but because they shared Jesus, and Jesus was bigger than their side. This is the Misfit 12, the disciples unfiltered. Next time, Philip, the disciple who always did the math, and what Jesus does when your faith keeps reaching for numbers. Subscribe to Bible in Focus, and I'll see you in the next story.